Everyone, and welcome to today's AI for Grant Pros session, how to stand out when everyone is using ChatGPT. This session was actually originally presented at the Grant Summit, so Grant Professional Association Conference, Grant Summit in Baltimore last month. I know some of you in the room here were at that conference. Let us know in the chat if you were. There was so much good wisdom being shared across so many sessions there that we know that not everybody who wanted to catch this live could. So we decided to rerun it as a webinar and also open it up to the broader public. So welcome everyone. We are in a very interesting era of grant writing with the advent of AI. And I'm excited to dig into maybe kind of a hot take that we at Instrumentl feel very passionately about, and I know a lot of grant professionals also feel very passionately about, which is that AI cannot outright you. It just can't. But it can amplify your expertise and sharpen your delivery. And actually, funnily enough, I think it can really help you stand out when it's also the very thing making a lot of proposals blend in right now. And the way it can do that is by being your thought partner. So let's take a look at where we're headed today. We'll be together for about an hour. I saw some questions in the chat about if this is going to be recorded. It is. So if you have to step away for a moment, fear not. This is recorded. You will get the replay and the slides both delivered to your inbox this week. So we're going to spend our time here digging into first 3 key things to include in your proposals to help them stand out from a sea of GPT-generated documents flooding funders' desks. So ChatGPT really has made grant writing more accessible than ever, and that means that your proposal is up against many more, and probably some of them pretty good-looking ones. I'll talk more about that in a moment. We're then going to move on to kind of the meat of the matter, which is how you think in the age of ChatGPT. And we have a 5-step framework here that you can apply to collaborate with your LLM of choice to get the most out of it, to use it as a thought partner or a peer in the process, which is where I believe the strength of LLMs really lie. You're going to hear me say ChatGPT a lot in this presentation. You can just take that to mean any LLM. So whether you're using Claude or Perplexity, whatever you're using, just interchangeable. I call it ChatGPT. And lastly, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at some brand new AI tools inside Instrumentl we just launched earlier this month. Isabel is asking if we're going to get the recording or PowerPoint. You will get both. It'll come in your inbox this week. So for any of our first timers in the room, I know there are actually quite a few of you. Welcome. Instrumentl is the most loved all-in-one grants platform for prospecting, tracking, and management. And we help over 5,000 nonprofits and grant consultants save time in finding and applying for and winning and then managing more grants. And like I said, I'll share a little bit more about Instrumentl towards the end of this workshop. And last thing here before we dive in, I just want to introduce myself for any of our first timers. I'm Nia. I am an events and community manager here at Instrumentl, and my job is to develop helpful and educational events like this one to share with our Instrumentl community. I actually come from the nonprofit world. So prior to this, I worked in rainforest conservation and research. If we have any rainforest folks in the room or any conservation folks, give me a shout out in the chat. I was looking through the registrant list and I did see a few of you, so I'm wondering if any of you were able to tune in live. And I've been talking for forever. Cheetah conservation, Beth, I actually saw you on the registration list and I was so excited. I didn't want to call out your organization because I was like, I don't know if she's going to be here. Yes, Drew, save the frogs. Okay, this is exciting. Sorry, I got distracted here. I've been talking forever, so I want to pause and hear from you as we dive into our learning content today. I'm really curious to know, where does AI currently plug into your workflow? I know I'm not speaking to GPT newbies here. You told me in your intro poll that a lot of you use it every day. So I'm curious, where are you using GPT? How have you found success with it, especially as it comes to grants? Jill says ideas. Let's hear what else you all are using. Ideas, research, reports and storytelling. Okay, these are all good. Cutting length as a thought partner, perfect. Polishing, mock review, editing data. Okay, so there's a lot of ways we can be using it, right? When we asked grant professionals that same question in a recent survey, almost half said that their main use case was drafting proposals. Some of you here are also saying you do that. I'm sure all of us have at least tried it, right? Write XYZ. So we've maybe tried using ChatGPT to write something, and then we realized it sounded fine, but it wasn't quite you. Let me know in the chat if you've ever experienced the AI aftertaste, where it's written something for you and it looks good and it's definitely professional, but it's just not you, right? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of yeses in the chat. Um, so there's a new challenge that we're seeing now that we're all using ChatGPT, and it's this sameness trap. You can probably really easily spot generic AI language because it all sounds kind of similar, and usually it's just good enough. And every grant writer now has instant access to good enough language. Everyone can sound professional, but few sound real, and very few sound unique enough to stand out. Let me know if you guys know this Spider-Man meme. I love this one. So, the question is not how you should use GPT the best way, the way that'll make you stand out. It's how you think and how you convey your thinking in the era of GPT. So let me explain what I mean here. GPT, Claude, any LLM, it's a tool, just like the internet, spreadsheets, those are all tools, right? And now that everyone is using this tool, the bar has been raised. So a little analogy moment. Like before calculators, I imagine, I wasn't there, but a great mathematician was someone who could multiply big numbers the fastest or most accurately. And then with the advent of calculators, everyone could do that. So multiplication wasn't enough to make you a great mathematician, it was table stakes. And instead, it came down to, what are the theories you're pursuing and proving? How are you thinking about the math? Something like that. Mathematicians don't call me out here. So here's the good news. With the bar for quality proposals getting higher, the differentiator, how you stand out, it's you. It's really about your human creativity, your trustworthiness, your credibility, and most importantly, how well you think. This is what funders are craving now, and it's what today's session is about. So let's go deeper into this concept of quality shifting and our bar being raised. This is, of course, an oversimplification because so much goes into a great proposal, but pre-GPT, a big part of winning a grant meant submitting a well-written, polished proposal that told a clear and compelling story. And if your grammar was strong, your structure was tight, your narrative made sense, you signaled competence and you signaled professionalism. And often it was enough to set your proposal apart from many others. But today, these things right here on the screen, these are all table stakes because with GPT, everyone can write a narrative. Everyone can have it polished. It can be grammatically correct. It can even be beautifully written, right? So what we're seeing is there are new differentiators to alert funders that you're the right one to help them deliver on their goals. And I think three of the most important ones to consider are clarity of thought, credibility, and coherence in your messaging. So let's dig into each of these a little bit deeper. Clarity of thought. To me, this means how deeply do you understand the problem? And do you know exactly what change you're creating with the work you do? So put another way, it's the logic of precision. Is there a very clear cause, effect, outcome, correlation, causation in your work? So let's look at an example. Our program seeks to empower youth through education and mentoring. That's good. It's a noble cause for sure, but it's not really clear what you do or what it leads to. And then we can compare that to the one on the right, which is last year, 82% of participants, weekly mentoring sessions, 9 out of 10 students reported. So the thinking here is clear and it's articulated well. Now, with the first sentence, you can still win. I'm not saying it's impossible, but in a sea of competition, that first sentence just doesn't stand out. The second pillar here in our differentiation framework is credibility. So funders are looking for evidence that they can trust you. Especially now in the GPT world, funders are asking, can I trust this organization to do what they say? And you'll notice this builds very directly on our previous pillar, clarity of thought. So your thinking is clear, it makes sense, and then you're backing it up with proof that you can deliver. So our team is highly experienced in food distribution. I mean, sure, maybe they are, but we don't actually really know that they are, right? Whereas our logistics team, led by a 10-year Feeding America veteran, managed 3 million pounds of food, less than 1% waste. Now we're saying we can deliver because we have before, because we have these specific credentials and this criteria we meet. And we're not just telling you we're experienced, like in the first example, but we're showing you how. So that kind of specificity builds trust because what funders want more than big promises are clear signs that you can deliver. And our last big differentiator is coherence. When we tell a story in a proposal, is it the same story that a grant maker hears when they visit our website or they meet our leadership team at a conference or they see us on Instagram? It's this idea of having really consistent messaging across all of your touch points and all of your materials. So here's an example. If our proposal for a school mentorship program says we're going to expand to 10 schools, but then a report that we submit alongside it talks about 4 schools. And then our website doesn't really mention either of these numbers. It just says we're piloting this mentorship program. It's kind of a confusing message. Rightfully so, a funder does not really know what they're going to get here. And in reality, all of those might be true. We might be going from 4 to 10. So the report and the proposal are both true. And it might actually still be in its pilot phase, but the way the narrative is presented just doesn't quite add up. So it's not just whether or not what you're saying is true, but whether you're saying it coherently and consistently everywhere you show up. And so I'm curious, take a second to think about your own organization. If a funder read your LOI and then your proposal and then checked out your website and maybe your Facebook or your LinkedIn and then also looked at your annual reports or any other materials, would they hear a consistent story? What do you think? Yes or no? Because this one to me sounds simple, but I know it's actually really hard because this was something my organization struggled with a lot. It was always a last minute scramble to figure out, who has the password to our website builder so we can go in and update something because we just submitted a proposal, it went out to a funder, and we realize now that our website says something different. We haven't updated it in a few months. So articulate writing, polish, professionalism, they aren't enough. We need to stand out through clarity, credibility, and coherence. So let's get into the good stuff. I know these 3 things that I just shared with you are not anything groundbreaking. As a grant professional, you already know all of this stuff, right? The reason I wanted to set the stage with this kind of almost basic information is because what I think is really going to help you stand out is something that you already have the muscle for. You already know you need to back up your claims with credibility, right? You already know all of these things. So I think when we think about using AI, it's really how can we use it to enhance that muscle that we already have? So when we start to audit our messaging through that lens, I think the first place we want to look is how we talk about outcomes versus activities in our proposals. At the end of the day, funders want outcomes, and so do nonprofits. That's the goal of everything, right? It's not about the mentorship program at the end of the day. It's about the hundreds of kids who come out stronger and better equipped and more resilient. But here's the thing. Many grant writers I talk to, even people in other lines of work, stumble around outcomes because reporting on them is hard. First, data is a beast. It's hard to collect, right? It's even harder to track down. It might be spotty, it might be inconsistent. Maybe you realize after the program is done that what you measured actually wasn't the right thing to be measuring. And then on top of that, the most important outcomes often take a really long time. We can't, after one semester, confidently say that, the kids who are in our mentorship program are going to be more successful high schoolers, college students, adults. We can't say that, right? We can point to immediate metrics like if their grades improved between September and December, but that systemic change that we're after, you can't actually report on that a lot of the time. And so I'm curious, is there a reason any of you want to share that you haven't been able to report on outcomes to the extent you'd like? Is there something in your cause area or your mission that's made it hard to talk about impact? And while you all are thinking about that, I see a couple folks in the chat saying they keep getting kicked out of Zoom. We will make sure we send out the recording. So if you miss anything, don't worry, you'll get the replay. But I do want to say the Zoom join link that you get in your inbox is unique to you. So if anybody else is using that join link, if you shared it with a friend or a colleague and they're trying to join using that same link, it will consistently kick one of you off because you have to have a unique link. So that might be one of the issues there. I'll have our team also look in on the back end. Okay, we have some answers here from folks about why measuring outcomes or reporting on outcomes is hard. Kate says our systems are always a mess. Yep, 100%. Krista says Zoom has been kicking people off meetings all day, so it might also be a Zoom problem. Sorry, folks. Kim says lagging metrics can be an issue for us. Katie says outcomes are often qualitative but not quantitative. Um, they're hard to track, says Corey. Yeah, so oh yeah, Pamela says, so sometimes there might actually be laws preventing you from like very explicitly talking about outcomes. So there's a lot of reasons why reporting on outcomes is hard. Here's some more points I often hear. So all of this to say, there's very many reasons why outcomes are a tricky thing to focus on, but they're also a vital thing to focus on. Because it's the root of what funders are investing in, right? Like traditional stock market investors, for example, they're buying monetary return when they invest in a stock. Funders, when they invest in a grantee, are buying outcomes and they're buying the change that you're creating. So even with outcomes being hard to write about, if any of those reasons we just talked about apply to you, you can actually still tell a credible, compelling story right now because you already have the raw ingredients. That's your activities, your early results, your intent. And then with the right framing, that is enough to show funders the change you're creating and build trust in your organization's capability. I'll show you how in just a second, but first, I want to bring back a little old school throwback for a moment. I know we're talking AI. I'm going to throw a wrench in it for a moment and bring us back to logic models. So, show of hands in the chat, give me a yes if you regularly use logic models in your fundraising. Yes, lots of logic model love. Some no's. I see some no's. Lots of yeses. I love logic models, says Estelle. Yes, for federal funding, says Christopher. Whenever required, says Pamela. And not really, says Shani. What are logic models, Holland? I'm going to get to that in just a moment. So yeah, we have a spectrum here. Margaret says, yes, they are the program framework. Elizabeth says, tell me more about logic models. Elizabeth, I am so glad you asked. So, for those of you who are hearing about logic models for the first time, or maybe you just haven't explored them quite enough, I'm going to use the Kellogg Foundation as my source of truth here because they have one of the most comprehensive guides to logic models. I'm actually going to link it here. So if you want like a really comprehensive overview of it, I recommend going into that. I'm not going to go too nitty-gritty today. But in short, it's a model that links your work and your activities to the outcomes you drive. So we go from here's what we do to here's the change that's created because we do that thing. So the components of a logic model are first inputs, the resources we need to do said thing, activities, so the actual what that we're going to do, and that's our planned work. And then we move into outputs. That's the thing produced because we did this activity. Then we go into outcomes one step further. Because we produced this output, this is what changed. And finally, we get to impact, which is sort of the long-term effect of our work, which is the long-term, difference that was made. So a very rudimentary example here, sticking with our mentorship program. For inputs, we provide trained mentors, a meeting space at the school, basic program materials. Because we provide all of that, mentors are able to meet with students weekly to build relationships, set goals, practice reading. That's the activity. And then the output is that students participate in regular mentoring sessions, and we document that through attendance and session notes. The outcome, so what changes because of this program, is that students increase their confidence, they improve their reading skills, their grades, their attendance gets better. And then the big difference, the long-term impact this makes is that students are more likely to stay in school, graduate, pursue positive post-secondary pathways, become engaged members of society, maybe even help create positive change of their own. So it's a very step-by-step process to go from, well, here's the thing we do, all the way to, and here's why it's so, so important that we continue to do that. So this is a simple way to think about it. It's not always that linear, right? Or another thing is we might be so deeply ingrained in this work that we don't actually paint this picture as explicitly for external stakeholders as we should. Or we have those hurdles, like Roxanne is saying, of shallow data or lagging outcomes or measuring that impact. This is where I think GPT comes in as a thought partner to help you think through an effective logic model so you can put your best foot forward. So LLM best practice dictates that you should start with a trained GPT or a custom GPT, one that already knows your voice, your work. That's not part of this workshop. There are plenty of resources online for how to do that. But regardless, once you're there, you're with your GPT, here's what you can do. You can take your project description, so like a one paragraph blurb about the work, and go through some prompts with it. GPT, I think, is really good at seeing logic, at testing assumptions, at finding flaws, and helping weave threads. So in this stage, we're using it as a thought partner to strengthen that clarity of thought, which we talked about as a core differentiator. So I want to take one of these prompts for a spin really quickly, and I'm going to do this on a generic, untrained GPT. So what we're going to see here is definitely not the full potential of ChatGPT, but I do think it's going to give us a good taste of what thought partnership looks like compared to what we may think of ChatGPT's primary purpose, which is like writing or generating original content. So I'm going to open up a new chat. Let me actually share my GPT screen here. And hopefully, I don't know if you all saw the GPT outage yesterday. Hopefully, hopefully it's up and running. But here's what I'm going to paste into, oop, one second. Can everyone see my GPT screen just to confirm that my screen share is working? Yes, okay, perfect. So I'm gonna copy this into ChatGPT. I'm gonna give it very little context. Like I said, you usually wanna use something trained, but for this, I'm just using this one sentence. So I'm a grant professional, I'm writing a proposal, I wanna focus on clarity, coherence, credibility. And here's my program description. So I'm sticking with this mentorship theme. Our after-school program provides tutoring and math, reading, 200 middle school students, yada, yada, yada. And then I'm going to pick a prompt from that screen I just shared earlier. And I'm going to go with the objections one because I like objection handling. So I want to see what GPT has for me. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to add this prompt directly copy pasted from the presentation I was just sharing. What would a skeptic say about our theory of change? How would they challenge our logic? So I'm just going to paste that in there. I'm going to let GPT think for a moment. And then it's going to tell us where it thinks the flaws in our logic, or at least our storytelling, might be. This is basically pressure testing our logic to make it as strong as possible and also catch anything that a funder might get caught up on. So let's read through some of these. I'm assuming tutoring automatically improves academic outcomes. So it's asking, are these tutors trained? Are they even qualified to be doing this work? That's definitely a good point, right? If my kid is enrolled in a program, I want to make sure that whoever's leading that program knows what they're doing. I'm assuming attendance is going to be strong enough. So I'm planning this whole program, and the assumption is that kids are going to show up for it. Tracking homework completion doesn't guarantee learning progress. Sure. Family engagement nights, that's one of the programming pieces I suggest. So ChatGPT is saying, why family engagement nights? Why are you doing that? And then the program description lacks details about the assumed mechanisms of change. Where is your evidence? So it's pointing out all of these places where I haven't really told my story well enough. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find a couple that resonate with me and then proactively try to address them. So figuring out, are these actually objections or are they just areas where I haven't explained myself well? So maybe this one stands out to me because I actually have thought this through. So I might say something like, going back to this very first one, are the tutors trained? I might say something like, our tutors are graduate students training to be full-time teachers. They rely on a third-party approved curriculum. How should I convey that in a single sentence in my description? And then ChatGPT is going to come back with some options for how I sort of weave that into my narrative. And I have all these suggestions. I'm going to figure out how and where I want to incorporate that logic into my proposal. And so you can do this process with all of the prompts in that screen and many more. Also, I do want to say, if anyone here works with youth or educational programming, I know this is incredibly redactive. My husband ran a before and after school program for years, and I can just hear him rolling his eyes right now. But for the sake of a quick tutorial, this is why we're using this kind of really simple example. I know there's so much more that goes into how we actually go through this thinking and this logic. But we can see it came back with these options, and then I'm going to think about how I want to embed this into my proposal. So let's go back to our slides. So here's all of these other prompts that you can run through that same exercise with. And I see, before I move on, I do see a question in the chat, the use of proprietary or sensitive materials. Free AI model use automatically gets the rights to train on your material. Yes, so this is not a comprehensive webinar about everything you need to do with AI. 100%. You want to make sure that the way you're using AI is in line with your organizational guidelines. So if you have security standards that your organization is held to, make sure you're following those fully. If you have a team that handles data and tells you, where you can use it and where you can't, make sure you're listening to that guidance. And then, like my colleague Rachel put in the chat, you do want to turn off the option to improve the model for everyone. You can always do that, at least with ChatGPT. I think you can also do that with all the other ones, and you can just Google, how do I turn off AI training? It'll tell you the instructions for how you go through that. Diane says, I only use information that can be found on our website or socials. That's another really good way to go about it, is anything that's already publicly accessible, so you're not accidentally sharing anything sensitive. So screenshot these prompts if you want. Like I said, you'll get the slides. And I want to say, at the end of the day, we know that funders buy outcomes, not activities. And so I don't mean that you need to have perfect longitudinal data, but you do need a credible, compelling story of change. And so GPT can help you work through that logic, articulate it more clearly, especially in cases where maybe some of your long-term outcomes are hazy or you don't have specific metrics on it yet. I think some of those prompts are going to be great just to help you refine how you're thinking about it and how you're proposing it. The next thing I want to move on to is credibility. So this is the next pillar in our list of things that will set you apart. And it signals trust. It's why funders are more likely to fund existing grantees over new grantees, because they've gotten to know existing grantees, right? And if those recipients delivered their impact in the past, then they want to take that safe bet. They know that that person can deliver, or that organization can deliver. So if you're a new applicant to the grant maker, on average, you're going to need to work harder than past recipients to convince the funder of your credibility. These are some of the things, certainly not all of the things, but these are some of the things that make funders trust you. And it's what grant makers are looking for, sometimes explicitly, but always at least implicitly, to assess whether you're the right person or the right organization to help them get to their desired outcome. So competence, which is showing them you know how to do the thing. Alignment, which is showing them that the outcomes that you're working towards are the same ones that they want. And then integrity, demonstrating that when you say you'll do something, you really will do it. And the thing you do is exactly what you said you were going to do. So I'm curious, I want to hear from you. What do you use to convey these traits to funders? How are you signaling your trustworthiness in a proposal or in email communications? Let me know in the chat box. What are some of the things you rely on to tell a funder that you're trustworthy? Stakeholder feedback, says Alyssa. Hillary says alignment and then competence. Carol says capacity of our team. Past results and survey feedback, existing data. Kate pulls in past funders who they've gotten funding from before. Trustworthy partners. Participant storytelling is a good one. Nancy says years of doing it already. Yeah, so that's that competence piece. Testimonials. Okay. So a lot of really good ones here. These are some of the ones that come up often. I see a lot of what you're saying also reflected here. Um, Credibility can be demonstrated in lots of formats. So it can be logos, it can be images, it can be testimonials and firsthand accounts, it can be numbers and data. Team bios, I think, are a really important one. I know some of you mentioned team competence and team qualifications. That was something that at my organization we actually relied on very heavily. It was one of our main sort of pillars of trustworthiness when we were applying for rainforest research grants, because the herpetologist on our team who led our research expeditions, he is one of the top herpetologists in Peru, and he's responsible for discovering dozens of frog species new to science. So that background and that experience that he has under his belt was a huge trust signal for us as an organization. So thinking about the qualifications of your team, we love frogs. I love that that comment. We do love frogs. Um, yeah, staffed lived experience as client population, says Nicole. That is a really good one. Totally. So this is again where we can turn to GPT. If you haven't really built your credibility signaling muscle yet, GPT is a great partner here. So the first step is as simple as sharing your proposal and asking, what are some things I should add in this proposal to signal my credibility and trustworthiness to a funder? Maybe you're just starting out, or maybe you're doing a new project and you're not sure what to point to, right? So just even figuring out with the help of ChatGPT, what are some of the things that I could have in here that would make me sound more credible? So I actually want to try this with our earlier mentorship prompt. I'm going to copy this exact prompt I just read out loud. And let me just go right back to our ChatGPT and share it right here. So I'm going to just take, what are some things I should add in this proposal to signal my credibility and trustworthiness to a funder? So again, this is for that stage of, I'm not actually sure what I should be pointing to. Can I get some ideas? And like maybe what ChatGPT tells me, maybe I already have some of that stuff and I can just really easily embed it. So demonstrated results, recent outcome data, past successes, quotes or testimonials, a lot of the things that you all mentioned. The other one it's suggesting is evidence-based models. So this is a great option if you don't have your own data to point to yet. Maybe it's a pilot program, and you can't say that you've already driven these outcomes, but you can point to evidence that the model you're employing has worked, and therefore that's why you believe you will drive these outcomes. You can confidently say that because your program is built on a model that has worked in the past, right? Staff experience and qualifications. A lot of us touched on this already. Strong partnership, school alignment. So this gives me a whole lot of ideas. I'm going to go through this list and I'm like, well, some of these things I truly can't speak to. It doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to include it. And then other things, maybe I'm realizing I actually can speak to really well. For those of you who already have your own data and you have, years of getting it done, I know a lot of you in the chat talked about how you're already doing this. There's a more advanced step you can take, and it's asking GPT to surface your existing credibility indicators. So this is because credibility is so intertwined with who you are, what your organization has done. You really do need to prime your GPT well. So some things you can share with it so it has context are things like your annual reports, summaries of your programs, your website with information about all your projects, your team and their bios and qualifications and credentials. So you don't need to share sensitive data necessarily. You can just be pulling things that are publicly accessible online, but you do need to prime your GPT so it knows your impact, it knows your outcomes, it knows everything about you, right? And this is critical because you have to bring the authenticity. ChatGPT cannot do that for you, otherwise it's hallucinating. And that's absolutely not what I'm advocating for here, right? So in this previous example, where we didn't actually have a whole lot of data to lean on, we were using ChatGPT to help us figure out, what can we say? In the case where you do have a lot of data to lean on, you can prime it with that. And then ChatGPT can actually synthesize your materials and identify trust signals and articulate them for you from what it already knows you to have done before. So here are some prompts that can get you started depending on the materials you're asking ChatGPT to reference. You're basically asking it to identify in your own background and history what actually does make you credible. Not what would make you credible, but what does? Like, what have you already done? So I'll pause here for a moment to give you a chance to read through these. Screenshot if you like, you'll get the slides, of course, and then the staff bios one is in here as well. I know I've already talked about this one a lot, but it really is a favorite of mine. I like the way that this prompt takes it a step further, where it's not just name dropping folks sharing their credentials. So it's not just we have the best herpetologist in Peru, but it's also explaining why that specific expertise sets your organization up to be uniquely qualified to do this work. So it's like we have the best herpetologist in Peru, and also no other peer organization has any herpetologists on their staff. I just made that up. That's not true. But taking it a step further of applying that staff bio to the context of your organization. And so this brings us to our third differentiator, which is telling a coherent story over multiple touch points. This is the game that the largest, the most successful companies excel at. Their name, their logo, their message, it's exactly the same on every billboard, every bus stop, every TV ad you see. There is no question about what they do or what they sell in this case. No question about who they are. And they do this because they know their reputation is built over hundreds of touch points. And the same thing goes in grants, actually. Trust and reputation is not built from one single proposal, right? No matter how good that proposal is, it's also all of these other things, all these other ways you show up in the world that contribute to your brand and your reputation. So that intro email, that LOI, that proposal, that report, your website, your Instagram, your staff's LinkedIn profiles even, all of them tell part of a larger narrative. So to build that coherence, you can use two key tools. It's your logic model. So going back to that earlier step where we created that logic model, and then what we call a messaging house. So the logic model, like I said, we discussed earlier today, it's that framework of inputs to impact. And you can use that to distill your core concept. So this is going to be your anchor idea that all messaging returns to. It's kind of like a mission statement for your program, and it's rooted in that central change you're driving. So every proposal, every report, every email should circle back to this one clear idea. So a funder consistently hears that same through line. That second asset that you'll want to create is a messaging house. So this is one living document that contains things like a summary of your program goals, your key outcomes, your proof points. Maybe there's a language bank of key phrases, certain impact statements, some of the things that you all referenced as things that you point to for credibility. So maybe you have certain testimonials in here, things that you want to frequently point to. And this is yet another place where GPT can be a great resource to you. First, it can help extract that core concept. You can say something as simple as, from this logic model or from this program description, what's the one sentence summary of the change we're trying to create? So you can just ask for that core concept. And this probably is not going to get you to your final core concept, right? It's going to need your creativity and skill to get it to a place where it feels authentically representative of your work. But it is a good starting point, something to help you, start drafting and thinking about that. And then you begin to build a messaging document. So you can upload past materials to whatever extent you feel comfortable, proposals, reports, LOIs, website materials, Instagram captions if you want. Maybe you have a great social media team and like your Facebook content is great and well written. So you maybe want to upload some of that. And you'll ask GPT to pull out common language or repeated statements, anything that shows up consistently. And this becomes the raw material for your master messaging document, your messaging house, right? And it's a living document. So like I said, you'll continue to add to it as you get more data, as you get new messaging, testimonials. It'll evolve alongside your work. And it'll be a really handy foundation for future proposals too, or any messaging at all. Because you can share that messaging document as a starting point for GPT to pull from if you wanted to draft something new for you. So I know that was a lot. This is also, I think, not a new concept to most of you. A lot of you have boilerplate language that you pull from. So it's really just putting everything into this one document. The other thing here is that this messaging document is not limited to grants. when you create this document, it's a service that you're doing to your entire organization because now your leadership, program staff, development colleagues, everyone can reference it and use it and speak with one voice. So it's um, just a wonderful asset to have for your organization as a whole, right? So here are some GPT prompts you can use to help build a coherent and consistent message. And there's something for every stage here. So if you're just drafting your core concept for the first time, or if you're creating your first messaging document, or if you're updating an existing one, GPT is also great at spot checking your writing, picking up on inconsistencies. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. I'm going to let you all read this. And I'm gonna quickly reference the chat. There is so much Instrumentl webinar love going on in the chat right now. Thank you, folks. That's very kind of you. I'm glad you're enjoying I'm glad you're enjoying the webinar. We're not done yet though. So again, screenshot if you'd like. So remember, coherence builds credibility. And in a way, all of these things that we just discussed, coherence, credibility, clarity of thought, they build on each other. So once you start tackling one, you're also kind of starting to get at the others. And it's sort of this self-reinforcing loop of just stronger and stronger messaging. Now, I want to leave you with something very tangible. So let's turn what we just discussed into a 5-step framework you can take back to your desk and actually use. These are best practices for employing AI as a thought partner in your grant development. Because, and I fundamentally believe this, ask anyone at Instrumentl, we all stand by this. You as grant professionals will always outright ChatGPT. You are human, you know the work, you know funders. What will really help you get to that next level is a coach or a peer, a reviewer, a thought partner. So like a little external help picking apart and critiquing and strengthening what you write. And that's where ChatGPT, I think, can really come in for you. So let's walk through it. First, we're going to clarify your logic. Before we even worry about language, before we worry about copywriting and messaging tweaks here and there, we have to make sure the reasoning is sound, right? So GPT is great at helping us see whether our causal chain makes sense from input to activity to impact. So it's that clarity of thought. Then what we're going to do is we're going to shift from outcomes to activities. We know that funders fund change. So you want to push your writing from what you do to what actually happens because of it. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't mention what you do. Of course, you have to mention what you do. But the focus really should be what happens, what's changing, what's the big difference you're creating, right? I have some more sample prompts here. But there's also all of those earlier prompts that we went through. You will get, answering the chat questions here, you will get all of the slides as well. So you can screenshot now, or you can just wait until it's in your inbox, and then you can reference this forever. The third thing we're going to do is surface those trust signals. So clarity is critical, but it's not enough, right? You also need to prove you're a safe bet. So you want to uncover buried indicators of credibility and trust and make them front and center instead of implicit. Usually, we already know that we have to prove that we're credible, right? It's already part of our writing inherently, but it might be hidden or it might be something you have to interpret. We really just want to put it out there. We want to make it clear. We want there to not be a single question that we can get this done. We are trustworthy, right? Then we'll anchor a core concept. So this helps unify all your messaging to distill your logic into a simple, powerful sentence that captures your purpose. So we don't want funders to feel that we're wishy-washy about what is it that we're actually concerned about? What is it that we're passionate about? No, this is the thing that we care about. So that's why it's really important to have an anchoring core concept. And lastly, we want to tell a consistent story. Funders are paying attention to this. If your LOI, proposal, your website, your report, if they sound disconnected, if they're telling pieces of a different story, or you try to piece the puzzle pieces together and it's just not quite adding up, you're leaking trust, right? So that was a lot of information. Let's recap some of these main takeaways. First, it's that AI has leveled the playing field and everyone can turn around something clean and polished. There's a new bar, and that new bar is all about how trustworthy, how coherent, and how clear you are. And then you are the grant professional, right? You're the expert in the room. AI can be a great partner to you in that work, but what sets your proposals apart will hinge on your humanness, your creativity, your expertise. AI is just there to help you move faster and with more ease through that work. Prompt engineering this, prompt engineering that. And I just want to say, I really believe that this era does not belong to the person who's the savviest with AI or the best prompt engineer. Instead, it's about who is most capable of thinking clearly and articulating that thinking. So, like we just talked about for the last hour, I think AI is most beneficial as a partner to you to test your logic, to sharpen your clarity, surface your credibility, stay consistent in your story, and really amplify the expertise that you already have as the grant professional. That is how you stand out in a world where everyone else sounds the same. So, on that note, hi, Alan, you told me you weren't going to make it to this webinar, and here you are. On that note, one more housekeeping item before I let you all get back to your day. We have one final event of the year coming up. It's on December 9th, and we're going to be joined by this absolute powerhouse lineup of federal funding experts. We're going to dive into all things government grants, what the shutdown changed, what to expect in 2026, all that good stuff. So if you want to come, say yes in the poll. We'll automatically send you a calendar invite with the link to join, and you'll be on the list for our last webinar of the year. And I really wouldn't miss this one. I love all of these ladies. They are so dang smart. So I hope you can join us. And on that note, I am all wrapped up here. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is right there. I'm also going to put my LinkedIn right here in the chat. If you want to shoot me over a message on LinkedIn, I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. For all of those familiar faces in the room, thank you so much for being here. Yet again, another fun hour with you all. And for all of the new folks who joined us for the first time today, I want to see you at our next event. I hope this was a fun time for you. I hope you learned a lot. And I hope you got to connect with some of our fantastic Instrumentl community in the chat box. My absolute favorite thing about these webinars is who's in the room with me, and it's all of you. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, your skepticisms, your successes. It really paints a totally different picture when I'm, delivering this presentation, but I have all of your experiences to also reflect on and shout out. So thank you so much for being here and for participating. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.